good on your end?
Yes, we're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. We will start the Thursday, December 18th, 2025 meeting of the Ad Hoc Facilities Committee. We will start with the roll. Mayor Genrick.
Here.
Alder Galvin.
Here.
Jesse Sharp.
Here.
Chet Lamers.
Here.
Ian Griffiths.
Here.
Paul Martzke here. Brian Johnson and Garrett Bader are currently absent. Next item on the agenda is the approval of today's agenda. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or corrections for the agenda?
Move approval. Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Approval of the agenda carries unanimously. Also let the record state that Garrett Bader is now in attendance.
Good morning.
Next item is the approval of the minutes from the August 20th, 2024 meeting. Does anybody have any comments, corrections, or actions on those minutes? Hearing none, looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to item E on the agenda, regular business, consideration with possible action on the fire station proposal within the Fire Station Flats development located at 420 South Broadway. Where are we starting?
Well, good morning, thanks everybody for being here. We're going to have a presentation, we have a whole team assembled here able to answer any questions and provide some little specifics on this. So again, I appreciate your time, and I will turn it over to, well, I'll let the team kind of introduce themselves maybe first.
Do we need to make an official motion to open the floor for this, or no?
Yes, not for the chief, but for the rest of the group, yes.
Okay. Motion to open the floor for discussion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the floor is open. Let's proceed.
Introduce them.
Well, I guess I'll start, okay. I'm Sig Strutmanis, I'm with General Capital, we're the developers of the Fire Station Flats project and the fire station. We won the RFP that the city issued last year in 2024. We've been working on the project ever since, and I'll update you on some of the specifics in a minute, but that is our role here today.
Eric Ponto, Ingberg Anderson Architects, working on the Fire Station Flats residential portion, but also working with Laura on the exterior imaging of the fire station.
Hi, my name is Laura Eisnagel. I'm an architect for Wendell and Five Legals Associates, or Five Legals Design. We are the fire station experts on this project, and we'll be doing the inside of the fire station. So today we have...
And then we'll have a presentation and we'll answer any questions as we go, but okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our general outline of what we're going to do. So we're just going to give a brief overview of the entire development as a whole. Then we'll dive more specifically into the fire station, and then we'll talk about what's next. So with that, I'll let Sig talk about the development.
So I think that everyone's familiar with the development in concept, but basically there are two pieces to it, and we'll show some visuals of the project in a second. But there's an 85-unit affordable housing component that's on the corner of Art and Broadway. There's a small commercial piece in the ground floor there. There's structured parking that's part of that project. And then there's basically this knuckle between our project, and the housing project, and the fire station. And so the idea was to leverage the site work and having all the subs on board, and having our construction management in place to be able to bring in the fire station as cost effectively as possible. So where we are right now with our side is we are finalizing the financing. There are still some pieces of the puzzle that need to come together. We've applied for several additional tranches of financing, including housing tax credits that are the 4% piece of housing tax credits, also some housing trust funds, and other pieces that will together make the capital stack on our side. Our project does rely on the fire station as part of the financing. There's a community serving facility component, which we can talk about in a minute, but basically there's a piece on the ground floor of our project that will be a community education center, where we can imagine, and the chief, we talked about having programming that will benefit the neighborhood, our residents, and also potentially serve as a voting site, things like that. So there's a community component that's bridging between the two projects. So we would hope that these two projects, the timing will coincide very nicely for a July, August wrapping up of all the financing, the design, et cetera, so that by August we will be able to break ground. And that's in the highest altitude, and our team will talk about a more specific schedule. That's where the overall project stands at this moment. Any questions? I want to be very informal about this. If anybody has questions about the schedule or the overall project, we can take them as we keep going here. All right, turning back to Laura.
Great. So the fire station. So kind of just giving a really brief overview of where we've been. So we've been working with your fire department now for about 4 or 5 years. We started back in 2022 programming a larger station. We did some GIS studies trying to figure out where the station should go. We did a couple test fits. But really we began back in earnest just over a year ago when we started diving in with Sig's team and Eric's team. In the summer of 2024, we all agreed on a concept and we really started to get that developed more and more. It was too large at the time, so we started narrowing that down, trying to figure out how to get it to fit on the site along with the housing development. And then finally, this past summer, we got a concept that everyone agreed on and we moved into the first phase of design, which is schematic design. We are not quite through with schematic design yet, so this is just an update. We will be done with our schematic design process, which is the first phase of design in January. So essentially, this is an overview of the site as it lies as a total. So as you can see here on the north side of the property in the blue is the developer project, so that is where the housing development is. And then in this red area down here, that is our fire department. And in between is that community education center that Sig was talking about, that connection between the two where we have a little bit of crossover. A couple of things to note on this property is we do have dedicated parking for the residential side. We have dedicated parking for the fire side. And then we are also considering a future development area along the back or the western half of the property. Kind of zooming in a little bit more on what this is going to look like. This is more artistic rendering of the site. But essentially, since the parking lot is in the back and our main street access is in the front, we really wanted to make sure that when pedestrians come to this facility, whether they come from the front or the back, it's a lovely experience. So we are making sure that there is some kind of pathways and we have some renderings showing what this could look like for your citizens as they come into the facility. But making sure they understand, hey, this is where we come, please avoid the big red doors. Essentially, just a quick overview, we are proposing building a 3-story fire station project. It's about 36,000 square feet at this time. The first floor is our apparatus and our apparatus support spaces, such as our watch office and our decontamination. I'll go over that in the next slide. The second floor serves as our living quarters for our department, and then the third floor is our administrative space and training. So when we take a look at this first floor then, in the gray up here at the top, that's where that connection starts to happen. Just north of that line, inside of the development piece, we do have a community room that we'll be sharing as a space. And then in this lobby, we'll have some sort of an experience where we can have some historic pieces for the department to kind of showcase. And it'll be guided so that the people who are visiting the fire department know then to go up to that third floor for admin. To the south of this then, this is where the action happens for the responders. So we have our primary bays with our engine and our ambulance. And these first 2 bays, our larger apparatus. In these second set of 2 bays, and then some support vehicles in the very bottom. Through the center core here, we have some support spaces such as a workshop, EMS storage for the entire department, not just the station, and some other utilities in that area. And through this then, we have our decontamination process. So one of the most critical pieces in designing a contemporary fire station is making sure that our responders are able to clean themselves after an incident of any sort. So we bring them through kind of a guided process where they come in, they can clean off their outside gear, their inside gear, clean themselves, and then get back to work. So in this space here, we also have locker spaces to make sure we can keep our gear off the apparatus bay floor. It serves 2 purposes. It keeps them away, keeps that clothing away from the contaminants that are on our apparatus bay floor, and also keeps our gear away from sunlight, which deteriorates the fabric a lot faster. So it serves us really well to keep that off of the bays. And finally in the front is an office space for our responders. So when they're on duty, they will be in this front area. We can call it a watch room or a radio office. decompression area, whatever they like to call it. But this is where we will do report writing, we'll have shift changeovers, and our responders will be there throughout the course of the day as they wait for calls to come in. So moving up to that second floor then, we had a lot of discussion early on in design, what goes on that second floor? Is it our responders or is it our admin? You know, how does this really work? And what we ultimately determined is keeping our responders close to the bay floors as possible is really in the best interest of our community. It just increases or decreases those response times, makes everything faster to get out to the community. So we are proposing putting our dorms on this north portion of the property, of the facility, and then we're actually going over top of 2 apparatus bays to get to our other support spaces for our living quarters. So we have our kitchen and our day room, we have our exercise area, and then we also have our space for our battalion chiefs for their office, and then a mezzanine space out onto the bays, which will provide some training aspects for our responders. Once we go up to the 3rd floor then, as the base bid, or as one of the alternates that you see in your costing, is that it would just be a shelled-in space with nothing actually constructed up there, that if in the future we are to be able to put the admin in, we'd have a space for it. The alternate then is to fit out this entire area. So this is how you can see the offices kind of wrap around on the exterior. So we have natural light for our employees. We have a large training room and simulation lab. We have an admin break area, and then some more joint offices that kind of wrap around. These 2 go over top of that last bay, and then these just kind of continue over those first 2 bays, if that makes sense for orientation. Also up in the very front area in the lobby space is a conference room, so if people are coming to visit the fire department for any reason, they have access to a conference room without coming truly into the fire department. We can kind of contain where our pedestrian traffic goes. So, do you want to talk about this part?
Sure. So you're seeing here in the foreground the residential portion. So Broadway on Arndt, residential basically goes to this line, and then in the background here you're starting to see the fire station. And the idea was that we have a palette of materials that kind of works with both buildings. And then there's a retail component here you see on the corner with an entry here, but then we've got a direct connection from the residential into the community serving space here that's also accessible from the fire station side. And the idea really was kind of breaking down the mass, but having the 2 work together. So here's the fire station portion. Again, here's the residential that stops here. There's a shared wall. This is the main entry. And from that main entry on the public side on Broadway, you can also get into the community serving space, which is over here. So that's kind of a shared space. You can kind of see, well, things are very obvious, but here's that outdoor space that is connected both to the kitchen, day room area, and then this is the fitness. The office serving functions on top here. These are the residential dorm areas. And there's been, you may have seen some earlier renderings, there was some, through the process of removing some of the square footage, you know, some of this changed, so the design kind of developed from that point.
Also, it's important to note that none of the signage has been
Yes.
approved, discussed, anything like that. This is all really preliminary at this point for.
All of this is just kind of
Yeah.
placeholder.
Yeah.
Right now.
So don't worry if you don't like the sets, we'll fix that.
So here's kind of a straight-on nighttime view, and you can again see that outdoor space. Here's the main entry from the public side from Broadway. And then again, the dorm function, more office. And this is the exercise space on the top there. Here's just kind of a view looking down a little bit, so you can see it's a good sized kind of outdoor porch area here. Again, it's accessible both from the kitchen area and from the workout space. And one of the things we're really trying to do is make this connectivity from the front to the back, from Broadway. A lot of people will be coming from the public side, but many people will be coming from the parking lot side. So we'll show you some backside, but creating kind of a forecourt here with landscape and a visually appealing kind of entry conditions, so people, it's very clear where to enter. So here's the back side. Now again, this is from the parking lot side. So because of the way the 2 connect, the residential portion, the fire station portion, The entry is back a little ways, so that image that Laura showed of the site plan, it really was trying to create an interesting path to that door because of that distance. So we'll show you a couple of different views here, but the idea is that everybody's parking in this parking lot, taking this path, and how can we create kind of a visually interesting path to that door, using both the building and breaking down the structure, but then some landscape elements to kind of create an interesting condition. So here's that kind of next step forward, kind of stepping in. And you can start to see, you know, how the path is not just a straight path, but using the landscape to kind of create a visually interesting. And again, as Laura said, none of this signage is official, it's just kind of a placeholder at this point. But you can see too, then where the residential portion here connects. So everything from this point is fire station and then residential on this side. Kind of the next step forward, this is the main entrance from the parking lot side. But one of the ideas is creating a little plaza here. You know, there's school groups, there's other things, people that come to visit, and having a little outdoor spot here that before you come in, you know, if there's some type of activity that's happening, some type of discussion, just creating kind of a welcoming experience as you come in. Okay. Is that, any questions on the architecture side? Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting parts about a station like this, when you have parking on one side and an entrance on both sides, is we don't have a back of this building. We have all three sides that face public. They're all going to be very visible, so making sure that it's a great experience for anyone who's around the building on the whole side. So as I mentioned, like I said, we've been working on this project for several years now. We've been really trying to whittle away and see if there's anything else that we can cut, how can we change, what can we move other places within your department to get this facility as compact as possible. So when we started back in 2022, it was almost double the size it is now. We've been really working diligently with your department to try and figure out what else we can kind of squeeze out of this one. So that's where we are currently, right about that 36,000 square foot mark. Budget.
Sure. I want to share with you three scenarios of the budget. And first off, I'll say that the budget numbers that we currently have are based on Wendell's experience in Wisconsin. These aren't national averages or taking out of some kind of means estimating book. These are actually projects that Wendell and Five Bugles have worked on. And so right now, our basis of cost is $400 a square foot hard costs on the fire station. So that's going to be consistent throughout these different scenarios. The other thing is that we've locked in a lot of the soft costs, including the architectural design piece, other fees and soft costs that be associated with these different scenarios. And so I think that these budgets are apples to apples is the point. And the three scenarios are basically the full build scenario, which is where we currently are, with the full 36,000 square feet, which you'll see up top. And there, the total budget at the end, including hard and soft costs, is $19.5 million. And let me just address the hard cost piece of it without making any pronouncements. And that is that we're working on the schematic design now. This has not been in the Green Bay subcontractor market yet. We've had early conversations about the grading piece, things like that, some of the site work pieces. But our intention is that once those schematic designs are done, that we're going to go out to the street with our construction team and we're going to try to beat the heck out of these numbers. That's how we can put it. But right now we're using our numbers that have been proven up in the market in the last couple of years. So the full build then, that $19.5 million. The next scenario that we wanted to share would be the alternative that is in that base bid that Laura described. And that is taking the third floor and doing a shell. And if it doesn't look like it's a radical decrease in numbers, it's because you're taking 12,000 square feet, you're still building the base core and shell. You're building the walls. It still has some, basic HVAC, things like that. Windows are all in place. And so it's something about $140 a square foot to build that space out later. The I guess what I'd say is from our experience with trying to phase things like that, is the remobilization costs are going to increase the secondary costs. The costs will go up if you have to remob and bring people back to finish all the spaces. So to me, this is not the best value. You may be getting the base core and shell, but building out the interiors is going to cost more in the future. But right now, our best guesstimate of doing that would be 16.7 million with a third floor of the base core and shell. And those additional costs would bring it over 20 million if you included the build out of the third floor, if that makes sense. So right now, what this gets you is the base core and shell on the third floor. And then I would say the most radical departure from the program is to just wipe out the third floor entirely, to have the fire department have to address the administrative needs differently. And in that case, you bring the size of the fire station down to 2 stories or 24,600 square feet. And then also based on the $400 a square foot as the construction cost. But the other thing to keep in mind with this is that some of the other costs are fixed. Site work doesn't go down. You're still doing the same amount of site work. Certain administrative costs, design costs, do not go down. So from this perspective, I'd also suggest that it's not the best value because you're not getting as much bang for the buck on the fixed costs. But to do the 2-story, call it, peeled back fire station is 13.8 million based on those $400 square foot cost today. So those are 3 scenarios that we have for cost. And maybe if you, Laura, want to talk about the cost over time, just as a point of discussion.
Yeah, so Sig said we track all of our fire stations, and we do a lot of fire stations. It's all my group does. So what we have done is we put together this spreadsheet, and this is kind of a pared down spreadsheet of just, there's one station here that's in Southern Ohio, but the rest of these were all Minnesota or Wisconsin. The yellow line signifies what is in design right now and where the estimates are coming back from. And then up above is all actual bid with the exception of these 2. And I kept those 2 in there because they were bid a couple years later just for a compare and contrast to see what happened with those 2. In the estimate section, we do say if it was estimated by our team or by a separate CM, so we can kind of get an idea for that. But essentially, this is what we keep looking at here, just saying like, since about 2024, 2023 for the bid year, we've been seeing right around that $400 a square foot mark. So this year specifically, we had Harrison, it bid at $381, that was a great deal. We were excited about that one. Union Grove was $389. Platteville, Wisconsin was $406. So right about that $400 a square foot, considering the fact that we will be bidding in July, we think we're pretty comfortable with that. Below the line, there have been some that have been coming in a little bit higher. Some of them are circumstantial. Some of them I'm not quite sure if we really will see that much of an increase, but that's where we kind of get this chart. That is where we get this chart from, so you can kind of see how that goes up. The question always is, how do you get your numbers? Where do they come from? That's where that information comes from. Any questions on that? I'm sure there are a lot of questions on budget. Do you want me to finish with the timeline and then we can come back and do open questions? See you next. All right, so then the what's next. So we are right here in the middle of schematic design. Schematic design is that big picture, 20% documents, just trying to really understand systems, how it's going to function, making sure everything's looking good, getting out for those first estimates from different contractors. Our next phase will be the design development. That's where we really work through all the details. We start working with the chief very specifically, like how are we doing our lighting? Where do you want outlets around the room? How are we doing our casework? How is this whole system actually fully coming together? A lot of action happens it's a lot of meetings, we make a lot of decisions in that design development phase. In construction documents then, that's when we go back. There are fewer meetings because we've already asked all of our questions, but as questions do come up, we will have meetings with the owner, and that's where we really start focusing on drawing it, putting together what does that roof edge detail look like, what do those windowsill details look like, really narrowing it down. And then ultimately we would get into bidding, construction, and occupancy. So looking at this schedule then, currently right now we are set to get our documents to the estimating team just after the first of the year. They will start looking at those documents, getting it out to potential bidders, while we are just doing our QA/QC, our quality assurance, quality check review internally to make sure that things are lining up We don't have, ducting going through huge beams, that sort of thing. And then ultimately, at the end of January, we'll be done with schematic design and be ready to move into that next phase of design. Typically, design development takes 2 months, 2.5 months, somewhere in there, depending on approval processes and depending on, primarily just approval processes and decisions being made. And then ultimately, we get into design development, or construction documents rather, which is between 2.5 and 3 months, which gets us to that time where Sig was saying that we would be hoping to go for bid this summer in July, and then ultimately hoping to break ground in August. I do put a little caveat here that is anticipated, because obviously we don't have a crystal ball, so if something happens and we have to pause the project, that is flexible at this point. But this is our goal, this is what we're working toward. We're anticipating about a 12 to 14 month construction period, which is pretty typical for our projects. And then that's it. So that's our presentation. We'll open up for questions.
Long time coming, Chief.
Yeah.
Questions from the committee?
Would you mind going back to your graph of the cost per square foot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you run through the 3 of those actually, if you wouldn't mind? Just kind of maybe starting from 1 to 3 again.
The A, B, and C?
Yes, please.
So,
Oh, the budgets?
Yeah, the budget.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
Oh.
The money, Sig, the money.
See, this you can slide around the, and so you can actually see which one you're on, but I do
Okay.
put you on there right now. There you go.
Let's use-
You got it.
Thank you.
So if you wouldn't mind, Sig, could you go from A to B to C, just kind of?
Oh, do you mean just kind of go through them again?
Correct, here, just to
Yeah,
see, because
sure.
I'm assuming your soft costs really don't change that much, right? That's really
They
hard
don't
costs.
change very much. They do change a little bit because some of the financing costs and some of the other
Sure.
costs do go down. Things like insurance, just because of the value of construction is going to go down. Insurance is basically a point of hard cost, 1% hard cost, so that does go down. A lot of the other soft costs stay relatively static.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Why do the professional fees not change? You've got a reduced scope for B and C.
Yeah, it's partly, well, it's interesting, depending on where in the process we talk about it, one could imagine that some of the architectural costs and structural engineering and things like that could go down. But depending on where you are in the process, a lot of that work will have been done.
Well, if we make a decision today not to go ahead with the third
Right.
floor, you're not doing that work.
That's very true. That's very true.
But those costs remain the same.
Well, part of it, I guess that what I'll say is that there's a piece of it, but it's not going to be proportionate per square foot. The reason I say that is because this will be a fully engineered MEP-F building. Actually, MEP, the fire will be design build. But the MEPs, basically, they're doing a vast majority of the work. To expand it to a third floor, for example, is not like on a per square foot basis going to be just wiping that work out. So for the assumption's sake, kept that static because I didn't have an idea of exactly how much you're going to reduce the fee, but that would be a discussion point in all fairness.
In each of the 3 scenarios, the FF&E networking
Yep.
costs on your presentation are different than what's in that packet.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I'm so sorry. So what happened was, we worked with the department in late October, early November, somewhere in there. So the numbers that Sig still had were the old FF&E numbers, so that's your furniture, fixtures, equipment,
Yeah.
alerting systems, all that jazz. We went through and we said, when we were trying to figure out how else to cut costs, we went through the department, we went through line by line through this whole spreadsheet, and we found about $200,000 in savings. I never sent that to Sig, so it was our fault, we just completely forgot. So those were old numbers, these are the accurate numbers, it's about 200,000 less. And the reason that it switches between A and B and C is
Yeah.
that obviously all of the offices are on that first floor, or that third floor, the
Yeah.
floor we're getting cut. So you're absolutely correct, it is different. That was just complete, we just missed that.
Okay.
They got sent out before I realized, couldn't make the correction.
And then between the scenarios, the FF&E and the networking numbers go down, but a lot of the IT piece to run the station is actually simple.
Yeah, it has an equipment.
That doesn't make a difference, right? Because of all the calling and all that kind of stuff, it's very IT intensive just to run the station.
Yeah, and to keep in mind too, like, these are, especially the alerting system, those numbers can vary greatly. So what we do with that is we start with it's an allowance, that's all it is. So if we get the initial alerting system information back and say we don't have the budget for it, we can work with Phoenix G2 or whoever you're gonna go with and say, hey, like, they don't have that kind of money, how do we cut this out? And there's a lot of wiggle room there that we can work with. We make a basis on our other departments, what we've seen in other places. Once we have that schematic design package done, we'll be sending our plans to your alerting provider and start working with them, get actual solid quotes, and keep adjusting that throughout this process.
Do you mind then, so can you just slowly go through B and C here again? So we're at 17.7 and 19.5 for hard and total
Correct.
respectively.
Yep.
So then for B, it's,
And then so for B, the total size of the station remains the same, and it's a third floor shell space.
Yep.
That brings down the cost. You reduce the upper cost, I said it's about $140 a square foot that we reduce those costs by for the base core and shell. And then the site work stays the same, contingency goes down, there's less hard cost. But you'll see also here, for example, the interim cost insurance and some of these soft costs went down, but to your point, the design fees and professional fees remain static just for I'll just say just for consistency purposes at this point.
so it'd have a third floor at that point from 17.7 to 19 to 15 and 16.7 respectively.
Correct.
And then option C is simply a two-story
Right.
option, right?
Things like all the things like elevators, all that stuff, vertical circulation, all that's already intact in this one, in this scenario.
Yeah, and keeping in mind too, if I could, there was one thing I was gonna say about that. The 149, the 150, what we were talking about for that square foot cost, that's based on a recent project that we just had bid that did that exact shell. So we were able to see exactly what that alternate was to fill in that space. That's where that number comes from.
So on that, with the build-out for the tenant space, you're saying that the bottom line number is a decrease of about 2.7 million.
Yeah.
But your shell cost times $140 a square foot is only 1.7 million. There's another $1 million that is on the bottom line that we're gaining by not doing that. Is that the case, or?
I'd have to check that. I mean, what you're saying makes sense just in looking at this, but I think that the the issue is just that if you were to, it is more efficient to build it all out in the beginning. There's no question in my mind, I'm 100% certain of that. What the gain or loss is, I can't quite articulate. I'll just say it's probably mostly remote, but their costs may have had some of the remote in it at 150. So I did it as a reduction. What we didn't do is say, how much does it cost to just build the base core and shell? That's what we would do next. Let's say once we have SD costs, because we know how many windows there are, what it all entails. But in this case, we just reduced the full number by what that interior build-out was for that other project, if that makes sense, on a per square foot basis.
Good question on the two-story fire station option.
Yeah, that's number
Is
3
that
then.
built, is that going to be designed and built to accommodate a future third floor? Or
Yeah.
one and done, that the
Right.
roof of the second is always the roof of the second, it's
Right.
not situated for future growth vertically?
I will answer that. The way that this is costed right now, there is no additional structure or accommodation for a third floor.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say in our experience with fire station design, it always sounds great. Everyone's like, we're gonna add that third floor, so we design the structure for it. To date, we have not had any of our structures actually do that. They've talked about it, they've come back, we've drawn new plans, we've looked at it again. They've never actually done it because it is very difficult to do that in the future.
Sure,
Yeah.
but if you're planning for it, and this is not a 10-year building,
Yep,
I'm
100%.
guessing it's going to be a 50-year
Yeah.
building,
It should be.
things change over time, and is it a
100%.
good investment now?
And again, it's up to you all if we feel it's a good investment. Like I said, we've just seen it time and time again where they don't do it. And some of these buildings are 25 years old and they still haven't done it. Now, it might still happen in the next 25, 30 years, but it is difficult to do that in the future.
I mean, your site's pretty constrained,
It's very constrained, yeah.
so the only way is up.
Correct.
That is true.
Yep, if you're gonna put the admin there. Yeah.
Can you go back to the shell again, where you do full on the first and the shell on the third, 12,000. So, I didn't do my math here just right. So the difference in these two bids is 2.8 million, is that right? Between the full build out and the
Yeah.
shell? Okay. And the shell is 12,000 square feet. So 2.8 divided by 1,200 is 233 square foot.
Or $1 million difference.
I'm not a builder.
Right.
That's what I said
That's
earlier.
right, yeah.
There's $1 million that's not accounted for.
Yeah, I didn't catch that, but it sounds like we came to the same conclusion.
Can I ask a question before we ask anything else? Additionally, at this point, the agenda item was, it was consideration of possible action. Are we trying today to determine the rationale for 2 versus 3, or need versus want, or what is the goal that we're trying?
What is the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the recommendation would ultimately go to Common Council.
Correct.
You put some perspective on this. Council, up to this point, has approved 15 million in our capital improvement plan. I think we have we've actually authorized, through a letter of commitment, 5 million in bonding.
Correct.
The chief and mayor and others, maybe you can speak to this more accurately, but I know you've had conversations with state and federal legislators around possible funding sources, but nothing that's materialized just yet, right? So that kind of remains a variable that could certainly influence which option you might pick. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Garrett, but to have a recommendation that goes to council, you guys are asking really great questions. I just joked with the mayor. How do we get you all on other committees and commissions? But it's council ultimately makes the final decision, and a lot of that then will take into consideration, obviously, all of the other budgetary constraints that we have as a city. But we really want your expertise and input on what the best option would be at this point.
So ignoring for a moment the specific cost of where the funding comes from for what product, to me, I look at this and say we're really debating A, B versus C.
Right.
And I think we all agree that, acutely, you're never going to pay less in the future for B than you are for A. So really, is it 3 floors of that activation, or is it 2, and you kind of forget the third forever?
Right.
Fair point. If I can put Cheryl in that spot for a minute, we have a TID that was created down here for Shipyard, correct? Does it include this site? And is this site programmed into that, or the?
Does, we can't use TIF dollars for public facilities.
Understood. Where I'm kind of getting at is, in the broader look at that whole South Broadway area. As many are aware, and I've chatted about this with a few people, but the current Mason Street Bridge discussion, Broadway intersection with it, the importance of that whole area, what else can develop, increment generated for other things to help justify certain expenditures. That, I think, should play a big role in what we talk about here too. Because I would hate to be penny wise, pound foolish, and not look at the best possible functional scenario in lieu of purely trying to save money.
Would you like to expand on that?
I can, but I want to pause there for a minute
Okay.
to put the most recent discussion in that context.
How many staff is the third floor planned to house?
So right now, basically, the third floor is accommodating, there's 3 open offices at this point. We have a total of 18 people that would move in there on day one.
And where are those people now?
Variety of places, right? So again, just the context, like Alder Johnson had said, just talk about grant funding first of all. We've reached out to many people. We have approximately $6 million earmarked for this project. It's tied to the federal budget, which obviously is having some struggles to pass. So that is tied in 2 different grants. Also reach out to numerous state grants, state funding, all kinds of other sources. So there's potentially additional funding coming in. This building is fixing the problem that we have. Our old fire station 1, as everybody's familiar with too, was basically hasn't met our purposes for many years. We had some significant plumbing issues there, which caused us to vacate that structure. Our next best choice at that point was to move here to City Hall, and we're welcome to do a quick tour after this to see our facility at this point. And it does not meet our needs. It does not meet our staff needs. We're doing the best we can with it. But that's the space that we have at this point. This also is going to replace fire station number 3 on Shawano, and then also it replaced the storage building that used to exist at this place. So we have a critical need for space of all different levels. This third floor, again, we look to design and build something, and again, that's why our programming was so high to start with, was we're trying to accommodate those 3 structures that we lost, including storage for our apparatus. We've since, because again, the budget's the way they are, we've since cut that back drastically, and then cut some more. And we basically are designing a building that's gonna last 50+ years, because we've seen that proven. We're replacing a building that's 100 years and one that's 88 years old. So, we get our value out of these structures. And currently our newest fire station is 25 years old. So our buildings are all aged, far beyond what we really hope to for useful life of these structures. But, really working hard to fit the needs in. We have cut and made some significant sacrifices to make this building a project that we can get to be feasible. We're at a point now where it's basically, this is what we've come up with, and we're trying to live within our budget and with our means, and we're trying to solicit for other sources of funding and just absolutely doing the best we can. But again, we're at this critical gap where, the direction at this point really helps our future and what we determined to do.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
And I can't get into the costs and all that
Yeah.
stuff, that's way beyond my expertise. But I look at the future, okay? You guys have picked up Bellevue, Alloway, and other communities could soon be joining. And I look at the PD, brand new building in 69,
Yeah.
and within 20 years, they're adding on a second floor that I don't think anyone ever anticipated needing.
Right.
And it's a mess.
Yeah.
So how hard are we going to push doing the right thing for our future? 50 years seems like a lot when you're 20, but when you hit my age, 50 years is an end.
It's amazing how fast it goes.
Okay? And so it happens.
Right.
It's not a big deal, and then all of a sudden, bam, you're in a problem. So as we look to the future, and I'm thinking beyond 50 years, and like I said, you could be adding on more communities as part of our metro department. Is this really practical not to consider finishing the third floor or eliminating it?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying is, Green Bay Metro Fire provides protection to a much larger community than just the city of Green Bay proper. So, that includes portions of Oneida Nation, Alloway, and Bellevue. And again, we're always exploring other options and other opportunities. Honestly, it's like, without the third floor in our administration offices here, we would be coming back with we'd have to come up with some other solutions, right? Whatever that might look like. And whether it's another building, whether it's something else, or major renovations to a portion of City Hall, I don't necessarily know what that is. I think this is the best option for us. We know that, and Tyler Garrett's one of our battalions can speak to this too, or Eric Gilpin that's on the line can speak to this, but we see tremendous value with having our administration offices with a fire station. We've separated a while ago with Fire Station 1, having that as administration only, but there's a tremendous value with being at a fire station. This, again, provides a fire station with their proper space, administration with their proper space, but together, some togetherness is very important for our operations.
So will this fit the needs if we finish the third floor?
Yes.
For 50 years?
Well, again, the crystal ball, you know what, again, our thoughts were a little bigger initially to accommodate potential future growth and all the administration's positions that would be required. We operate a very lean operation administratively. We've been working on a staffing plan to increase that. But again, we are where we are, and this meets our needs today with some potential for growth in the future, and then puts us on a great trajectory. So, will it meet our needs in 50 years? I don't know. I'm hopefully optimistic it will. We've put some rooms and some spaces, whether it's a conference room that could be divided up, or a potential other space where we move some things around. There's some potential, but again, we also want to be cognizant of a budget and not create these big open spaces that are for future growth that would never be utilized, maybe within that 50 years too. So we're very cognizant of the budget. We've developed a facility and designed a facility that meets our needs today, plus some room for potential growth. We have some decentralized functions now where our fire marshals are out of our main headquarters and at some of our other remote fire stations. You know, that process could continue, which would open up some spaces for future growth too. But it is also nice to be able to accommodate them for working at our headquarters building too.
So that would basically consolidate folks
It
that
has
are
that
current.
potential to, yes, and pull them back, you know. We do see some,
Or the ability to expand into the various fire stations should that need arise in the future.
correct,
Some
medical, yeah, like that.
So I guess my question comes down to, you know, I have to look out for the taxpayers
Yep.
financially, but also what's going to also keep them the safest. And our fire people, what's going to keep them the safest, what's going to be the most practical thing to use. And so when we're looking at these costs here, plan A, B, or C, even though it may hurt, are we better off going with the more expensive plan and getting things done right the first time, right away? Which again, frees up space here and creates other dynamics that could also positively affect the taxpayers. And I guess, you know, I mean, can that be addressed at this meeting, or are we just kind of trying to come up with where we want to go here?
Mayor? Yeah, just to respond to that, that's the other piece of this, right, is to see what, you know, what we should expect of taxpayers. And so I had asked Diana to work with Ellers just to give the committee a sense for, you know, what the difference in debt service would be for this. Because the reality is, you know, we're going to put it on the credit card, right? We're going to borrow for this to make it possible. And so to have the committee just take that into account, and Diana, if you could just briefly offer that overview on the difference in debt service and what that means for, you know, I think the estimate was a $150,000 home, so we could probably double that.
Yeah.
To give people a sense of what the impact would be.
You can just start a little bit farther back than that, just go back to the budget purpose. A few years back, when we really were starting to seriously think about putting a fire station in place, we had estimated about $13 million for a fire station. And then as we got a little closer, now the last 2 years, we've been estimating about $15 million of borrowing. We do have $1 million that has been set aside of ARPA dollars. So that is kind of why, you know, we have these different options, is because for years now, we've been forecasting with our financial advisors to put about $15 million on our debt service. Again, as you know, we have you know, a lot of annual borrowing we need for infrastructure. We also are trying to build and pay for a police station. So that's why we try to stick to a tight budget. And again, so that's why, you know, that's why they're giving you options that's just below the 15 million, but then also over the 15 million. Mayor, I don't have the document in front of me, and it's gonna go up on the screen if I pull it up.
When you had-
Here it is.
Sorry, when you had the 13 million, roughly what year was that?
The 13 million?
Yeah, as a budget.
Gosh, I think that was probably about 4 years ago. We started working with a financial advisor, but then we realized we were very, you know, it came to our attention that 13 million was never going to be enough. And at that point, again, it was an estimate. At the exact same time, we were trying to build out a police station and a fire station, so we put a number on it, you know, some rough number we were given based on maybe, I think that was based on what other facilities, other locations had built a fire station, right? And that probably didn't include a big, you know, administrative building at that time. And
Yeah.
so that's how we.
The reason I asked when it was, I mean, obviously, the cost of construction has gone up over the years from the beginning of time, right? But it was on a pretty steady trajectory until about 2020.
That's right.
And then it went almost vertical. And it started to round the corner, but it's still on a more significant upward trajectory. So I'm not surprised that the 13 million isn't even, I mean, these numbers are not unrealistic in today's market. So,
And I don't think finance understand, I mean, we understand the increase, but we also try, as I said, all of our buildings are aging, and so we're trying to get as many buildings replaced or repaired as we can, and obviously we have a lot of needs, so, you know, we had to put a budget on it, and so that's
For
where
sure.
15 million
Yep.
came from.
But I think my point is the justification of the dollar increase is absolutely there purely based on construction costs. Not asking for more, right?
Yeah.
It buys you less.
Since we've actually started this process, those numbers have still continued to go up.
Absolutely.
So again, we've, you know, it's a struggle because we've made significant cuts, but that price still is remaining about the same, and just because of those estimate numbers.
And we don't know what's around the corner, so
Right.
if not now, then when, I guess is.
Yeah, we've seen that. Yeah, it hasn't gotten better, unfortunately. That that slope is still climbing.
Diana, I see the three options there. That's, and forgive me, the chief was saying earlier, maybe you guys can help me out too, but it's not necessarily that we have to bond that entire amount, correct? There are other sources that will eat into part of that.
Correct. At
Correct.
this point, we actually, for in our 2026 borrowing, we did borrow, and we are moving forward to having a borrowing of $7 million. So to get this project moving forward, we have that, plus we have the ARPA dollars. And then, so then the remaining was, the expectation right now is probably projected is that we would borrow another 8 million, or based on phasing what we would need in 2027. And again, those are just assumptions. That's
Yeah.
what we have in our capital improvement plan for the last 2 years.
So for a total of 15 roughly.
15, correct.
Okay.
That does not take into consideration any potential grant, federal or state dollars or any other funding sources. This is what we assume that the city will be required to borrow for.
So if we said at this moment, this committee, we recommend you should go with option A, or A-ish. Okay, there's 15 mentally that's been allocated. Now how do you find the other 4? Right,
Correct.
for simple math.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
And again, I'm gonna go back to what Laura actually just said too. Yesterday I had to publish the packet, and the Excel spreadsheet I had with the estimates are probably different than the ones maybe that Siggy even showed. I think a revision came through around 9 o'clock yesterday. I published at 8:30, so our numbers are all in the ballpark. As they keep continuing to try to tweak and make them better, my numbers might be a couple $100,000 or a little bit higher, but in grand scheme of things, they're probably in the same ballpark. So Ellers is our financial advisor. They're the ones who help and manage all of our debt issuances. And so I had given them some information. They ran some numbers. We have all the details behind it. But for a $19 million over the next basically 20 or 21 years, because we're going to borrow it in 26 and 27, it would probably be a cost of about $1.4 million a year to pay for the debt service on this fire station. Over the life of it, that 19 becomes about 28 million using today's rates, or today's borrowing rates. As the mayor was just saying, they took a number of $150,000 home, whether it's probably something, it is certainly higher than that. I'm not sure if it's double for sure, but it's so what that does on an annual tax bill goes up about, maybe $35 per tax bill per household for just the fire station without any other borrowing requirements. That's the increase. I'm sorry, so that fourth column just says, if we go from the 14 million up to the 19 million, maybe they'd be paying for this fire station, $12, and if you go up to the higher portion, it's gonna be $17 per, for this increase, and so that shows you what the total tax bill just for this fire station would be for the next 21 years, about $361 for this case, it's a $150,000 home. If we almost double that or get it closer to 300, it could be, looking at $600 to $700 per, for the tax bill over the next 20 plus years. And it goes down based on the different options. So, it does have an impact on our residents. But again, we don't know what the total cost is if we had to build it out later. I have more details.
Is there, I'm sorry,
No
in your budget, is there as you think about having a new fire station, is there an offset at all in other expenses? So maintenance, anything?
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna probably have to defer to the chief.
Sure, we could probably all talk about it too, but certainly there is a substantial maintenance increase that we would see. We have, again, replacing these buildings, we had to sacrifice one building that was part of a larger land swap, so there is value to these structures. It's part of making other developments work too, so, the 2 buildings have been sold, or included in other land transfers, so there was value that we've obtained from those structures. But then certainly we would see some pretty substantial maintenance costs. And as you know, we have a fire station that we're replacing HVAC systems to a tune of $700,000. And it's just, the maintenance of these buildings is just impossible to keep up with. And, Station 3 is probably, at a position where we had, again, major significant plumbing leaks, and we're replacing hoods from our kitchen, and this is dropping sewage in our kitchens, and I mean, these are not like, where major renovations are needed if we're not moving forward with the projects.
I think to Jesse's point, I think that's a really good illustration to add to your graph,
Yeah,
Diana,
essentially it's worst case. What you're showing is worst case. You're not showing,
Right.
hey, there's an offset here
Right.
because we
Right.
have less maintenance. The other thing I'm curious about is, we're kind of, it seems like we're rushing to the conclusion that there's one solution here, and that you build out the third floor for the future and for other things, but there's always another solution. There's always another alternative. And so if we would say, no, you're going to have to stick to 2 floors, what does that other scenario look like? Have we really costed that out and said, this is what that is? And if it does mean we got to build something out in the future, what does that mean? High level, not, but to come here and say, well, for the future, we got to build out the 3rd floor and not consider an alternative to that, I think is doing a disservice.
Have you guys contemplated bidding this with the shell, but having the 3rd floor be an option in the bid package?
And that's how it is kind of spelled out, this would be bid out like that.
Because obviously we're reacting to
Right.
to estimates now. It'd be,
That's
nice
essentially
to,
action B, right?
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
right. Be nice to know, when those hard bids come back, where they're landing, because I can speak from personal experience. Those things weren't in alignment a couple of years ago.
That's a reasonable strategy, but I don't think that necessarily solves your budget issue. You've got a $5 million 3rd floor, is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's incredibly expensive space for offices per square foot.
483.
Yeah. I mean, you got $5 million to play with if you
Yeah.
didn't build the 3rd floor and you wanted to, I'm not saying functionally it's the right decision for the fire department. The proximities, I understand all the reasons of why this should be this way, but it's costing you $5 million to get it.
And so what's the alternative? What would you do with that $5 million?
You take $2 million and build a smaller office.
Would it
facility
make,
somewhere. Renovate
does it
City
make more
Hall and wipe
sense?
out an entire floor for the fire department. I don't know.
I mean, it's, you guys know I work for Schneider, and every year I'm asked to deliver services for Schneider. We have 120 folks that are providing services in my departments. And every year we're expected that the service gets better or stays the same, and my cost gets lower or stays the same. And, it's maybe it's not as bad as construction, but it's not easy to keep those costs down.
Sure.
And so I think we're faced with the same thing here, which is, how do you provide the services that you want to be able to provide to the city and that we want you to be able to provide to the city, but also keep those costs, that cost to serve, at the same cost or lower? And that would be my expectation.
We don't, we've also considered, if we don't do the 3rd floor, it really causes us to really consider, some of the things that we would normally have in a fire station are not on the 2nd floor, they're on the 3rd floor, like our training spaces and things like that. And, so we really would have to kind of, not necessarily go back to the drawing board totally, but there are some changes that we would have to incorporate into the plans too. So, it's almost not quite a clean break. We have considered other buildings. That was kind of our struggle to start with, is where, and that's the beauty of this community, is there's not a lot of buildable space. We have we are invested in downtown. Our administration has to be in the downtown area. That's key for us, and that becomes very difficult to site that too. So, having a 3rd floor on there is in this situation works well. But, ideally, if we had the entire site as a clean site, we'd build the 1-story building, right? And, that would meet our needs probably even better. But that's not, that the site, because of this unique development, this unique partnership that allows us to have a combination of development for residential, but also our fire station, and really serves the community very well. And, there are costs to that, of course, but having an alternate site with administrative offices is certainly an option. We just can't figure out where that option would be best suited. And, then if we did do that, take off the 3rd floor, that would mean the 2nd floor would have to have some additional work done to it too. That plan would have to be revised slightly.
Yeah. You were just saying, Paul, was just, I forget what your third floor estimates were, $400 a foot when you're doing the math on it?
Well, it's $5 million
Yeah,
for an additional 12,000 square feet.
right. Okay. The reason I say that is another project I've been working on recently, an office project, it was $325 a foot.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the numbers on it, but it's not terribly different from.
It's not the office space, you're paying for the additional exterior, that's where the money is.
Understood. I'm just saying, but for the equivalent too of then, what do you do if you don't do that? I don't think there's a huge cost savings for another option. If I can pivot back to, because I was just chatting with these guys a little bit to make sure I understood something. I mentioned before about area, South Broadway, developability, importance of development there. Diana, hypothetically, if a ton of development happens down there, we have the existing TID or maybe a restructured TID, whatever. If there's a positive TID balance, those funds can go into anything, hypothetically, right? That is within the TID.
It could be used for infrastructure or for development within that TID, just not for fire or city administrative buildings. So infrastructure for sure. Yeah, so the positive increment going into that TID definitely could enhance that area,
Okay.
but it couldn't be for a facility that's.
If there's infrastructure that's paid for with like a general obligation bond, can hypothetically TID revenue service?
Yes,
like
if as
that?
long as it's for infrastructure, yep, not
Okay,
building.
so there's kind of a roundabout way where more private development can help to the degree of what we're talking about here. Okay, if I may then, to put Sig on the spot here for a second, can we go back to that slide a little bit before this? I guess your overall site plan slides.
Let's see.
It might be easier to.
Few people know where I'm going on this, but I feel this is really important, so I want to ask this question.
You'll catch up here.
Just keep going, it's backward, 4 more slides.
And by the way, the architecture is beautiful. I hope it's said enough. Okay. Would it be feasible to move your entire site back 20 to 40 feet and rotate it slightly counterclockwise? Fully appreciating your residential
You mean
parking.
to do this? Because you're talking about the Broadway concept of straightening out Broadway.
Correct.
I think we'd started to look at that and talk about it.
You did,
We
yeah.
didn't, we didn't necessarily push that to any logical conclusion, but it's possible to rotate it. It's going to have some impact on the future development parcel. We're going to get into that
Mhm.
because the parking gets a little pinch.
Mhm.
The other thing is, this is minor, but we have to go in for a variance, a series of variances for the setback and some of the building right now is
Mhm.
developed. And that we'd have to go back for that because now you'd have a wider setback, a deeper setback.
I know some guys that can help with that.
So basically, if this rotates like this,
Just a smidge.
Right. You're talking about the possibility of Broadway.
And not even that severe, but generally speaking, what you're
Yeah.
saying, yes.
I mean, there is a pivot point there. It'll have some impact, Garrett, but
Yeah.
the point is that we looked at it's doable, but it has some minor impact.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll just have to make sure, I mean, speaking from the fire side, we'll just have to make sure that, because our longest apparatus are in those bottom bays, and there is a pretty significant grade change, so
Mhm.
part of the funding that we have to be 2 feet outside of the flood zone. So this building is actually up higher than the street, and we
Sure.
have to make sure that that stays at a less than 5% grade change.
Sure.
In order to get the ladder out without damaging the ladder. So that was another thing too, like if we do start changing that and push that road closer, if we can bring that road,
Mhm.
so that way we don't have
Sure.
to have this big of a slope out would be good.
Well,
But
just-
yeah, we could do it.
Just to tie all the loose ends here together, I mean, yes, the most recent DOT proposal, they call it Broadway, or 4A Broadway realignment, the hybrid proposal. In my opinion, the best scenario for the maximum development possible in my corridor. You essentially bring Broadway Mason back to a gridded intersection at grade. Therefore, if you can generate the max development, it comes to our point here of, if that's how we ultimately find the dollars long-term to pay for what we all really want, that I think cannot be overstated enough how important that all is. And we're really only talking 20 to 40 feet west and a slight little rotation.
Dan, are there, understanding, you can't put TIF funds towards the building itself, but are there other costs being incurred here that would be TID eligible, site work? Mayor suggested maybe parking lots, things like that, that would be substantive enough. right? Because I appreciate the mill rate is ultimately what people are probably gonna care about.
Mhm.
You know, so if you can offset that with things like putting Fire Station 1 and 3 back on the tax roll, but also reducing, you know, expenses that need to be funded really with the levy.
I mean, I would actually, I'm looking over to the development area, we would just look to see what would be a TID eligible expense. And like I said, as long as it's some kind of infrastructure, as long as it's helping the, you know, I guess truly infrastructure, and it's not for private development, those would be all eligible costs, but we'd have to kind of go through and kind of nitpick it and look at every line, and could it somehow come out of the cost of maybe the fire station flats, location, or the fire station and the private development of the housing, and that would really have the benefit for all. You know, maybe there's a few dollars that could be pulled out of this total estimate, and that could be used, $10, so we wouldn't have to borrow. That would be, you know, of course, that would be another funding source.
That would be tax exempt, right? So the rate would
Correct,
down
if it is,
a couple
yeah,
points.
correct, for those purposes, it would be a tax exempt, yes. And any borrowing for the fire station would also be exempt borrowing.
Right. And say, what's the timing of that future development? Have you contemplated that?
We've not. We're just trying to take this one step at a time. We have, this has basically been, let's say, preserved as a development parcel with enough depth to be able to do a, you know, more classic 60-foot deep building with some surface parking, understanding we have that underground or podium parking. But we don't have that, you know, projected at this time.
The utilities for the fire station and utilities for the fire station flats are separate and independent, and maintenance costs are separate and independent.
Yes.
City would take on all utility costs associated with the fire station and maintenance long-term.
You can see, you know, kind of clear division. We
Yep.
did that purposely.
Yep.
The answer is yes. 2 laterals, whatever.
It just hadn't been mentioned, I just want to clarify that that is indeed the case.
Are there two parcels there, or is that all one big parcel?
It's, not to complicate that, but it's going to be a condominium plat that's going to have basically 3 parcels, 3 condo units, okay? So the flats is one, and then the fire station community serving facility that's part of our ground floor is the second, and the remaining fire station is the 3rd condominium unit. But together, they're all they're all very separate. For example, we're not sharing vertical circulation, which sometimes you have these projects. At first, we had a shared stair, and we thought, you know what, cleaner just completely separates the projects.
Do the buildings have to be connected for your financial stack?
They don't need to be physically connected, but we do need to have, for our financial stack to work, we do need to have a CSF, the community serving facility, as part of this.
I think that was the other challenge too, going back to your point about if we straighten out Broadway and kind of shift the fire station back, we'd actually have to shift, in my opinion, both buildings back, because the connection was already really tight for us to get.
Yeah, and that was actually the point I was trying to get across, to just really take the whole site.
Yeah, we'd have to take the whole thing, yeah, it's not just the one building,
Yep.
we pull them, shove them back, which
Yep.
wouldn't have parking and.
Like I said, I appreciate your parking in the back, I do, so I want to be cognizant of that,
Yeah.
but that shift could really mean a lot for the
Yeah,
whole
so-
thing.
Yeah, because it'll be, and, sorry, see, I'm right in front of you, this whole area is probably gonna get reduced down.
Mhm. Yep.
But just want to make sure everyone's aware of
Yep.
that.
So whose responsibility is the community piece? Because it's in the blue side, right?
It's a combination of both. The piece that's in the blue zone is our responsibility. The piece that's in the fire station portion would be the fire station responsibility. I don't want to make this more confusing than it needs to be, but it's more of a financial arrangement rather than physically saying this many square feet is part of this or not. The fire station will operate completely independently. There's a piece of the financing as part of this lays into our capital stack. And then similarly, the financing of that ground floor is also part of the larger capital stack. And that has to be a community serving piece of it. It can't just be for our residents only. It has to be then working with the chief for education programs, open to the public, things like that. So there has to be a community benefit to that part of it, to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, so very specifically, the lobby is in fire,
Right.
The community room is in residential, and the bathrooms that serve it are in residential. That's
Right.
just like cut and dry.
So you're responsible for the lobby.
We're responsible for that. In 2 words, yes.
Are you able to pull the third floor plan up, please?
One more.
That's the shell.
Yeah.
So just a couple of comments. I mean, there is an unstated efficiency to have administrative resources in the same building that you're operating a fire station out of. I mean, I think it's wonderful to say, well, what if we put them someplace else to save $1 million? But what you walk right over is there's travel time, there's just, you have duplicate services when you go that route. So my first initial look at this was, I understand everybody loves private offices, but it gets really expensive really quick. What would this third floor look like if it was the training room and we looked at a more open plan for nearly everything else? I would just ask, like, how often is one-to-one privacy necessary in every single office? Understand that's what we all probably want, but it tends to be really expensive. So I kind of look at it as, is there a middle ground between the shell and the full that could kind of park us in that, $17.5 million phase, and yet keep the staff on site, try to pick up some other efficiencies. So that was one thought. The other thought was, and this one might be crazy, no third floor, but could there be leasable administrative offices on the first floor in the blue zone? And I don't know about how the financing or how the whole deal is put together, so forgive me if that's like, well, you can't do that because of X, Y, Z. But, and then, that exposes a rent expense for the, so do you want to rent versus own? That brings up another question, but it also gets administrative offices on the main level too, right next to the community, that community component, which could be kind of nice. And could bring our building back down within budget minus, a rent exposure on the other side.
Except if you need that space to make your end of the deal work.
Well, what I'll say is that,
Because the rent may not be.
yeah.
Right, a horse piece, right.
So our building is stick construction, which is the most cost effective. And right now, there's one level of parking podium that's precast with 4 levels of stick above, which I'd say pretty much maxes out stick construction. You can add maybe a 5th level, but then it becomes more expensive. What you're talking about would require, I think, just a 2nd level of precast podium, and we could get a number on that. But the idea isn't crazy or isn't completely, I wouldn't immediately dismiss it. You couldn't have administrative offices on the ground floor as another condominium unit, for example, right? So it's possible. I don't have a quick mental math of whether that would be more or less expensive than the other alternative, but it's not as easy as just add more stick building. It's going to have to be a more expensive precast under the podium.
Yeah, because you have to keep how many units you have.
Right.
Like, we can't cut any out of the blue
Right.
unless we have to keep that number.
Right. And just to speak a little bit on some shared workspaces, we were very cognizant of that too. There's a couple specific areas that we do have that. That's our battalion chief offices, our training staff, and our fire marshals in this building. The rest, we were really reluctant because of either disciplinary issues that we're dealing with those individuals, patient care and HIPAA privacy rules with some other ones, with like our mobile integrated healthcare paramedics, and then also let's say on the financial side too. So, again, we try to be super cognizant of that, and we did incorporate that very design element into this as much as we could.
As far as next steps, guys, talk to us about timing. When do you need confirmation from the city of which option we intend to pursue?
Alder Johnson, it's not a super easy kind of point to make. However, I'm going to work backwards. If we want to be under construction in August, then I think that we need to be making these decisions before, let's say, the end of January. I say that just because that would keep the overall month-to-month schedule intact. I'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
You know, the longer that the decision gets put off, then what happens is we just have to kind of touch the brakes, and eventually, my concern would be just that we don't want to slam on the brakes, because then the engine might just, kill, right? You gotta kind of come and jump the car then, you know what I mean? So right now, we've got all the team's attention, we have Wendell working on this with enough architects to get this done in time. So I would say that an expeditious, whatever you need from our side, we'll work fast and give you more information. I'm hearing different scenarios. We can do that very quickly. But that's my answer. Working backwards, we want to.
And that's helpful. When you think about, I mean, is the deal structure pretty much where we feel comfortable? And what I mean by that is just, how everything's going to come to play, like who's incurring costs, if you're bonding, if you're borrowing, if you're right, leasing, owning.
I could sort of try to help answer this. We've had many conversations with the chief, with the attorney, with development, with SIG. There's actually a net lease in between, and so we have gone through this financing a lot. And I think we're comfortable with the way it's going to structure over a long period of time, because it's a long lease. So yeah, I think we're comfortable with that. It's just how much does the city want to build on the fire station side?
Okay, and the only reason I'm partially asking that question is, sometimes, and I know you guys have done a ton of work on this, right? And sometimes, hey, if a deal structure looks a little different, it can have a savings in a certain way because you get access to a different, pot of money or a grant program or something like that. So I just wasn't sure how far down you guys have gone that path. Sounds like pretty far.
Yeah, I could just add for you, Alder Johnson, we have a signed development agreement and the lease, as you mentioned, and a number of other things. But the most important factor here is that we've committed to the 5.1, which was already approved by council. So it's just that remaining dollar amount that hasn't been, isn't part of one of the signed documents yet. Just whatever that number between 5.1 and the total fire station cost is, that's what needs to be decided. But all the other documents have already been approved. We'll just need to come back with an amendment for that.
Would you anticipate that we would do a standalone bond request on that?
Well, I don't think, no, because at this point, we already have approved $7 million for 2026. So at this point.
That's enough to get started.
And that's enough to get us started, plus we have $1 million really to pay for all of our professional services and items that are going on right now. So we have that $1 million plus $7 million, so we have $8 million to really spend by the end of 2026. With the, again, CIP projection, we put $8 million in for borrow in 2027. Now, what the timing is, what the phasing is, how much we need, whether that's the right number, we have to borrow a few more in 2028, or whatever the decision is made, or isn't the timing. So it's going to, I think we have what we need to keep this moving forward up and through in 26, and then decide what the final number is probably in 27, 28.
And I think one of the things, at least for me, that and partly why I was asking the timing, so thanks for that explanation, Say, is I certainly would love to hear others' thoughts too, but if there's value and merit perhaps in another one of these committee meetings in January, if there's more information that we want to see. And one of the things that, at least that I would like to see, is an analysis on TID qualifying expenditures within the project. Not saying that we would go that route, but I think it would be nice to know what is an option before making a final recommendation on which one of these we would proceed with. I think Jesse made some really good points too about the offset, and it would be interesting to know if we had an estimate on Fire Station 1 and 3, they were added back to the levy, what that assessment would be and how that might offset the mill rate impact. I know, Garrett, you had some thoughts there. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit more.
I guess tying that to maybe the specific type of bonding you were alluding to, Diana, and then how those expenditures can then be repaid through positive increment.
Really what we would do is we would probably use TID dollars to pay for those infrastructure, not even borrow for it, or the borrowing at least then could be, if they were TID eligible expenses, we could borrow, but we would only then have the debt service be paid from the TID dollars and not from on the
Okay.
levy.
So I guess maybe to Brian's point, then the larger question being, can enough qualifying dollars be found up front to negate the need for the?
Correct,
Right.
because when we're talking this 15 million that we're obligating, that it truly is what we're putting on the taxpayers, tax bills really for, or putting on the levy. So yes, if it ended up being a 19 million, but we have a couple million that could be, have another funding source, whether it's a grant or whether it is a TID dollars, that is certainly an option, you know, if we feel that the 19 million is really the right, you know, option to move forward with.
Did the million of ARPA, was that used for AED expenses?
That is what we're using it for right now, because, you know, we really was set aside originally two of ARPA dollars, which have to be used by the end of '26.
Right.
Was going to be for land purchase. Well, since the city already owns this property, we didn't need those dollars. So right now, as we're paying for some professional services and for some maybe site work on that, for anything that's needed on that. Actually, I would also maybe look to the to Deputy Director, sorry, Buchanan. Were any of these dollars for the ARPA dollars used for the raising of the Badger sheet, or was that all the ERA dollars?
We're primarily relying on the ERA dollars
Okay.
for that. We also have some EPA cleanup dollars.
Okay, so
that we rely on.
I didn't mean to sidetrack. I couldn't remember what was being added. So really, right now, it's just for current expenses to try to keep us moving forward with this project.
Yeah, and fully appreciating the timing of that expenditure period. The reason I asked the question, I just didn't know if any of those ARPA funds were used to pay for things that would be TID eligible. So in the spirit of musical chairs, you know, if it would allow you to maximize some of your sources differently. That's the only reason I wanted to broach that. And then, you know, and of course, I wouldn't expect you to have this answer on the spot today, Sig, but I do think between now and potentially, depending what the committee wants to do, but now and a possible next meeting, I do think it's worth a conversation around what a future timing could look like on that secondary development, because I do think, you know, any potential increment created off of that could contribute to the discussion if there is enough TID eligible expenditures tied back to the project. So I think that's something we can talk about and see if that's a viable option.
The one thing I guess I'd add in, if this is pushed to a future meeting for a final recommendation, is that obviously you guys moved into City Hall and utilized the space essentially as is, right? If that is a long-term solution, there's obviously a cost to that, to remodel it too. I think having that as part of the picture will create a much better platform for decision-making, because there are costs, and if they're not here, then they're likely somewhere else. And if likely somewhere else is in a 50-year-old building, then there are costs associated with those costs. So I think that's an important piece.
There's a lot of answers we never really settled on, even for this building, right?
Correct.
I mean, so to go back to that point, that could be a can of worms that we're opening.
Understood, right. But I think
Big old can.
I think having a dollar amount in there
Yeah.
as to what that would likely be as a cost, whether it's a cost there or a cost here, it's still a cost.
Even if it's rough and it's high
Yeah,
level.
I mean, it's,
We just do price square footage, I would imagine.
yeah, it's,
It provides a base scenario from which you can make a decision.
right.
Right now, I'm not sure that we have a base scenario.
And even then, it gives us that little wiggle room at that point to talk about opportunity cost, right? And if that's what we want to absorb or not.
Right.
And, you know, if you lose a little efficiency through but maybe it's worth the squeeze. You know, but right now, I agree, it's kind of hard to have that discussion because we don't have that analysis.
Alder Johnson, the next finance committee meeting is January 13th, and then council's on the 20th.
Does this have to go through finance?
Um,
I mean, it could go right to council, couldn't it?
The ad hoc recommendation?
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually have to defer. The ad hoc is a subcommittee of the finance, and they typically will move, finance will then send it to council for recommendation.
I mean, worst case, you just put it as a committee of the whole or something, right?
Okay.
I wouldn't want to slow it up because of a procedural thing when anybody can come to this meeting and watch it as well.
Sure. So the goal then ultimately, so that we could maybe have a decisions, maybe for a direction for them would be the January 20th council meeting. So I was just trying to give you the timeline.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's where I was, take the finance out of the equation if we can, and then, to me, it would be nice, it gives you a little bit more time, right, to schedule that second. If the committee were supportive of kind of essentially a hold, right, and then to do a January meeting, are there any other questions that you would want to have answered at that next meeting and would want staff to work on?
Does the development agreement have any performance requirements as far as delivering the project on a certain budget?
For the fire station or for
Yes,
the housing?
For the fire station.
No, and actually attorney had mentioned that joint portion is that the city has to help put that 5.1 million in at the beginning to help get that moving forward. The balance of how the city wants to spend on the fire station really, I don't believe has any bearing on the development agreement.
Okay, well, what I'm hearing though is that we've accounted for about $15 million for the project, and we're being presented with a $20 million project today. You got $5 million to make up, and there's no guarantee at this point that the project doesn't come in at 22 million. And what are we gonna do in July if it's over budget?
We'll call him, we'll help us out.
It's not, I mean, this is a,
Stoic.
it's real. Being delivered privately essentially, what guarantees does the city have
Yeah,
that we can meet the budget that we have available to us?
Maybe just address the timing of that. The July final bid is going to be the final bid. We'd expect that the SD bidding that'll happen before the end of January is going to be very enlightening. It's going to be the first time we really see the real costs out of the street. There'll also be the DD bid that'll happen probably with the X% set in March, April. And then the final bid we'd look at is the no surprises July. So I think that between now and then, we should have a couple of good indicators that, you know, whether we're way over here or trending in the right direction. So it's not just one, you know, it's not like we're waiting until July.
Understood, but those are still on preliminary drawings that aren't complete.
Very true.
Lot can happen between now and July.
Very true, very true. Yeah.
Just keep in mind, we do have contingencies in there as well.
I was gonna ask that, is this contingency that you have, is this a construction contingency, or is this your estimating contingency?
No, that's the, I'm gonna call it deal contingency. We have a 1% in contract construction bidding contingency, that's part of, I'm pointing at numbers aren't there, but in the hard costs. Which at this point, I think that, you know, we'd be foolish to not try to max out all those contingencies just because of the very point you're making. We haven't really seen it, starting to see some impacts, but there's some impacts of material increases and things we're starting to experience a little bit, so we have to be a little careful.
Any other questions? A lot of good ones today. That's what we wanted out of this group, so thank you, everybody. In which case then, I'd suggest that we reconvene in January once we have some answers to these questions. And of course, that doesn't preclude anybody from reaching out to staff if additional questions come to mind after the meeting, so I encourage you to do that as well.
Do you have a point person that maybe all questions should go through, a
It's a good
recommendation?
suggestion. Yeah, where should we do that?
Just so that we all go through the same path. And they certainly can come to me, I certainly can't answer your questions, but I could definitely direct them, or...
Maybe what I would suggest is Chief and you, Diana.
Sure.
Just because the finance ones are probably more
Yep.
your department, facility would be Chief.
That way, if you have any questions, you have to send them to Chief and I, and then we can make sure we get them to the team, that way everybody has the same set of questions.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to hold until meeting is scheduled in January.
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Alder Galvin, second by Mayor Genrich. Any further discussion?
I think the only caveat that if staff and Sligo URS could work together before January of that time, could we see a tweaked site plan option that would, when you come back, that would show to correspond with, I know the DOT version I believe is online, 4A Broadway realignment.
It's 4A, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's multiple 4As, but 4A Broadway realignment.
And just on that, we haven't gotten any final word from DOT on ultimately what the bridge plan will look like, but I think that is fairly unlikely. So I don't know how.
Never say never.
Yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to devote a lot of time.
I want to keep all options on the table.
That's fair. I just don't want to devote a lot of time and energy to that because I think the possibility of it coming to fruition is really slight.
Okay, any
That's it.
further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Galvin, second. We'll do this one to Paul. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Stopped.
Here it is.